My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
George Clooney and Brad Pitt's new movie Wolves is on Apple TV Plus September 27th.
That's where I want you to be now.
So if you want to see George Clooney and Brad Pitt, go to Apple TV Plus.
You got to start the story there.
Or if you want to see Brad Pitt and George Clooney, go to Apple TV Plus.
I am enjoying the show.
And if you want to see their new movie Wolves,
You can't do it, I'm going to help you out. I can do it, so do it.
definitely go to Apple TV Plus.
Admit it, it's cool. Okay, fine, it was very cool.
Wolves, streaming September 27th on Apple TV Plus. Rated R.
Hello and welcome to History for Weirdos.
We're your hosts, Andrew
and Stephanie.
And each week, we're going to take you on a journey into the strange, obscure, and relentlessly entertaining corners of human history.
Now listen up, friends, because it's about to get weird.
Weirdos, welcome back to another episode of History for Weirdos, and we have a really special guest with us today. I want to introduce Norman Ohler, the author of Blitzed and Tripped, two books detailing the consequences of drugs and World War II. Norman, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Of course. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Of course. And Weirdos, you know, this is one of our very first interviews that we have done. So the third overall. So we are really excited. I personally have read Tripped, have not read Blitzed yet, but I will do so probably by the end of the year. And I have to say Tripped is, Norman, I was telling you earlier, like this is one of my favorite books I have read this year. And probably one of my favorite historical books I've ever read. So thank you for writing it.
Sure. It was a special book also for me because it's a very personal book, as we probably will get into a bit later on. So I'm very happy that it's being well received in the United States. My favorite book,
absolutely.
It's the biggest.
Well, can you tell us what inspired the subject of this book in particular?
I had been fascinated with LSDs for a long time. Since I was 22, I think I was in New York and took LSD for the first time. That's when my interest in psychedelics kind of started, but that doesn't mean that I had planned to write a book about it. Because I also like, ice cream. I write a book about ice cream or something.
That's fair.
LSD is more interesting than ice cream, maybe. Maybe ice cream is also very interesting. But I at one point found a white paper by a company claiming that microdosages of LSD could help against Alzheimer because the same receptors in the brain, the 5H2 receptors that Alzheimer degenerates, are stimulated by LSD. So I thought maybe this is good for my mother because my mother suffers from Alzheimer, and it's when I suddenly had a topic basically for a book, because it became a topic in my life. Suddenly I was my father became curious because he said if this white paper is legit, and I spoke also to an Alzheimer expert about it, and he thought it was quite interesting. So then my father asked the obvious question: why isn't it a medicine? Why is it a legal drug that's apparently so dangerous it has to be prohibited? And so he had been a judge during his professional life, and in the courtroom, he was always interested in the best story. Like that would be the truth for him. The story that rings true is the truth, basically, or that's how we determine what truth is. So he said, "You better bring me a good story about why LSD is not legal. And if the story convinces me, obviously he would then consider using it for himself, and then also together with my mother, which he takes care of. And so that was then the research. I mean, it became kind of a personal thing to find out why LSD had become illegal, what went wrong, basically, because it was discovered by a pharmaceutical company. So they went the normal way, testing it, and they wanted to bring it onto the market. And obviously that didn't work out. So Tripp tries to tell that story, what went wrong with LSD.
And that what went wrong is absolutely fascinating because, as I'm sure, obviously you're aware, I found out because of you, it's naturally derived, which I didn't know until your book. I thought it was a synthetic chemical, but it comes from ergot, which is a rot in wheat, which has been attested to since antiquity. I know there was a 7th century BC Assyrian tablet talking about someone tripping on ergot, which is kind of amazing that we have like it's a Neo-Assyrian tablet. And I don't know which museum it's at now, but I know it is. Yeah, it's a Neo-Assyrian. So about I'd say like early 7th century BC or early 6th century BC, something along those lines. And they go into detail about how they took this and their mind was, blown, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with ergot is that when you find it in a field, which is possible, you could walk along through a rye field and find it, and then you could eat it, and you would probably have a reaction to it because it's very potent, but it could be poisonous because it contains a lot of different alkaloids and maybe also too much. So ergot was dangerous. In the Middle Ages, still, ergot infested rye could be made into bread, and that led apparently to several mass poisonings in Europe.
Wow.
So yes, I mean, LSD comes from ergot. That was also a little bit surprising to me. I had somehow known that LSD was from, in German we say Mutterkorn, which is ergot, the German word for it. But I also thought that the LSD you consume, these days, black market LSD is synthetic, but it's actually not. I spoke to quite a few chemists, and every LSD that we use actually it comes from this fungus, comes from a mushroom, basically. So LSD is kind of a designer mushroom drug, you could say.
A designer mushroom drug. I love that.
I know that would be great marketing if LSD was legal in the United States.
It's legal now in Australia for therapy. So I think it's just a matter of time and a matter of image change. LSD has a bad reputation for certain reasons that I examined and tripped. And maybe the book will alter the image of LSD a little bit.
I certainly hope so. It was really interesting in the book how, and I would love for you to expand upon this a little bit, how it seemed like there was some Nazi era propaganda against drugs, right? That Americans in the late 40s kind of picked up and adopted that mentality and brought it to the United States, and that sort of led to the drug policy that we've had for the last 50 years. Again, I'm oversimplifying here, but it sounds like even that understanding of the Nazi era, laws, it seems like it was based off of faulty logic. Like the Nazis didn't even believe in what we thought the Nazis believed. Is that a fair assumption?
Well, I mean, the Nazis did kind of believe in their own anti-drug policies. Mm-hmm. It just excluded certain drugs from their class. What is it called in America? For class 1 or Schedule 1?
Yeah, Schedule 1. Yeah.
For example, methamphetamine was not in Schedule 1 in Nazi Germany. It was actually legal. You didn't even need a prescription in the beginning.
Wow.
So the Nazis did have a very strict anti-drug policy. So for all the Schedule 1 substances, it was quite dangerous to take them. You could land in a concentration camp. And Harry J. Anslinger, the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in Washington, was of Swiss-German descent. He spoke fluent German, and he was kind of a Nazi, I guess you could say. I mean, he was American. He was an American official, so he was, I don't even know if he was in a party. I mean, he served under Democratic and Republican presidents. But he was a racist. He was a right-wing white supremacist, basically. And he loved the Nazi drug policy. But he had actually started also about during the same time, and I think he would have also done it without the Nazis. Like, he had enough anti-drug vibe in him because he thought that was a good way to suppress minorities in the United States. So maybe he learned that from the Nazis, because that's what the Nazis did against the Jews early on. Anti-drug policies were connected with anti-Semitic ideologies and the desire to criminalize Jews in Germany. So you can do that through drugs, for example, because the Jew takes more drugs than the non-Jew. That was a Nazi kind of prejudice. And Anslinger, like, he said that the black jazz community in Harlem they're all smoking weed. So that was a way for him to attack the jazz scene, which he hated because he thought it would corrupt American culture. You know, he thought white culture is American culture. So, you can actually draw a direct line from the Nazi approach to the American approach, or vice versa. I mean, maybe also Hitler or the responsible people in Germany knew about the American program. I'm not sure, but for sure, Anslinger knew about the German program, and that reinforced his own beliefs in racial profiling and drug prohibition as a tool to come to your execute your political goals.
Mm-hmm. So I know that LSD was first synthesized, I think it was, I don't remember if it was like the 1938 or 1939, and it was put on hold until like 1943. I might have my facts slightly wrong, but generally I think that's correct. And it seemed like there might have been a little bit of interest in LSD from the Nazi Party, but we don't have a ton of documentation about that. Is that a fair assumption, or am I completely off base here?
Well, no, the dates were actually quite accurate. And 38 was synthesized for the first time, and Albert Hoffman, the chemist who did that, sent his LSD 25, as he called the compound, which was lysergic acid diethylamide, and it was the 25th compound he created in that series when he was trying to develop new medicines out of ergot. And lysergic acid is the acid within the ergot that he thought was like the active component, which it is very active, I guess. So, but the mice in the pharmacological department of Sandoz, the Swiss pharmaceutical company, in 38, the mice who were given LSD, they didn't express that they were experiencing anything. They couldn't see it, that the mice were tripping. And I still don't know actually if they were tripping. I don't know if a mouse can trip. Probably there's also a change in brain chemistry in a rodent, because they later on, when they did like tests with spiders, the scientists saw that spiders would make different nets on LSD. Yeah. So animals do react to it, but they didn't see anything from the mice. Like, mice were just hanging out in the cage, and so they shelved LSD. They didn't, because they were looking for a stimulant of the central nervous system, because at the time nicotine acid diethylamide was a big hit in Europe by a different company. So they thought, because they were focusing on ergot, Sandoz was, that also the ergot acid diethylamide, which is lysergic acid diethylamide, would be a stimulant in the sense of increased heart rate or like, more physical activity. So they looked at the mice, but they didn't run around more than before. Maybe they were meditating, and they being even more still, and they thought this is not working. But then, well, I mean, if the mice would have sat cross-legged, maybe then they would have realized that. But they didn't see anything. So then the mysterious part is, why did they look at it again in 43? Because usually when you shelve someone, something is shelved, or someone, I guess. If you break up, then it's over. But I guess Albert Hofmann really wanted to reconnect to his molecule. And he later tried to mythologize it. He said, LSD found me, it kind of, maybe he dreamed about it, but he just did it again in 43. Because also by the time the company had changed its policy in regards to ergot collection, because before they hired people to run through the fields, like in Portugal especially, and kind of look for ergot in the rye fields, and if they found something, they would collect it. So they didn't have a lot. So that was not good for production, because the company produced a lot of medicines from ergot. Like a migraine medicine from ergot was quite a big hit. So they started from 38 onwards. They started mass producing ergot in a Swiss mountain valley called Emmental, which is famous for. They invented the cheese with the holes in it. So that it's a famous valley, actually. I think only in that valley the cheese has holes. So if we think in America, you think of Swiss cheese, always has these holes from the Walt Disney comics.
Yeah.
That's all like Emmental cheese. So, but in Emmental, I don't know why they made holes in the cheese in Emmental. I didn't research that, but the Emmental also had the reputation for having bad weather, and it was quite rainy there. I went there actually to look at it. It was beautiful weather when I went there, but like the average temperature is not good up there in the Swiss mountains in the Emmental. So they have a lot of fog. Also, it's quite steep, so the fields are not very large, and so the farmers were quite poor. So all of these factors kind of led Sandoz to the conclusion that they want to harvest now ergot. So they convinced the farmers to actually inoculate the rye with ergot spores that they brought in from the lab from Basel, where the headquarters was. So that was kind of a very new type of agriculture, actually, that was quite unknown before in Europe. It was like scientific agriculture, which is normal today, but like Sandoz kind of started it with growing the poison ergot. Also, the farmers thought it was very weird that for centuries ergot was the big enemy, and now suddenly they get more money if they cultivate ergot than they get for rye, which is the food. So they did it because they got more money, and then Sandoz had all this ergot in Basel in their headquarters, and ergot doesn't keep for very long. Like, you have to do something with it, otherwise it goes bad. Like, you can, I guess, refrigerate it for some time, but you can't keep it forever. I guess you can't freeze it. So they had to develop medicines, and then Hofmann looked at LSD 25 again, because I don't know, maybe there's one mouse that he remembered that was like actually sitting cross-legged or something. So he was doing it again, and this time he says he somehow must have inhaled something of the substance, or maybe something went into his bloodstream through a wound, or like he was tripping like a little bit while he made it, and he didn't know what was going on, because that was not, he didn't even, like, tripping was not a term for him, like it didn't exist, he just saw, things were like a little bit off, like when it wasn't a big dose, it was, no one knows how much it was, but he was still functioning. But he said, to his assistant, I want to go home, I feel a bit weird. And then when he was at home, he thought maybe that's the LSD 25. And so he decided the next Monday to do a self-test, and he made 250 micrograms of LSD, because he thought that was a really, really low dosage. Because it is just 1/4 of a milligram, which is no substance in the world is active at that dosage level. Like not even, I read that not even cobra toxin, which is the most deadly snake poison, is active in 250 micrograms. You can like have that and you won't even feel it, but he had this LSD and he felt quite a bit. He had a very strong trip. He had to, he took his bicycle and cycled home on 250 micrograms, which today we know is a heavy LSD dosage. I mean, it's not crazy, but it's quite a lot. Like it's a big, big, big trip. And if you don't know that if he didn't know what it was. So he was like a normal Swiss chemist in his, 30s, like never taken drugs before. Like drugs were not even, part of his universe, So suddenly he's on this massive LSD trip. And, so he thought he was going insane. He thought he was going to die. He had an ego death, like he was lying at home. His wife was like looking at him, and the doctor came and he said, you don't have anything, because his pupils were normal. His heart rate was normal. Like everything was normal, except like inside of him, like everything was different. He saw the walls collapsing and sounds were colors, and like he had a big trip. And but after 8 hours, it stopped, like every LSD trip. And he wrote the next day to his superior, Arthur Stoll, about this most potent substance in the world that he, stumbled upon. And Stoll, the CEO of Sandoz, first he didn't really believe it. He said, you must have made a mistake in the dosage. So they did more self-tests, and they all, came to the, the tests showed that LSD was the most potent substance ever found on the human mind. And they had no experience anyhow with substances working on the human mind. They were not a mental health, pharmaceutical, mental health was not really a topic like it is now. Also, there were no medications for that, like no antidepressants or SSRIs had been invented yet. So Sandoz was really stepping into a new field of pharmaceutical research and was quite excited, the company. They created an intoxication room in 43 at Sandoz. Like the secretary was sitting there with a typewriter, and then people could come in. People who worked for the company, like they would get the day off and could come to, well, not the day off. I mean, they didn't go home. They went to the intoxication room, but they didn't have to do their normal work. They could take LSD, and then they would, say what they experienced. And I read through these reports, and I, quote some of the funniest ones and tripped, obviously, how great it was. Everyone loved it. And like these Swiss people were like amazed. They were the first people to take LSD without having any negative thoughts that LSD makes you jump out of the window and all that bullshit that then later, was reported, falsely reported. So they had a good experience, and Sandoz thought that LSD will be like a game changer because it will put people back into a good mood, which was kind of a rare thing in 1943 in Europe. Also, they then tested it with mentally challenged people, like depressed people, in the clinic in Zurich, where the son of the CEO from Sandoz, he was the physician there. So he actually did the tests with depressed people. And I also read those reports and quote from them because they're quite interesting. Like it was like a severely depressed Swiss farmer who could be released after taking LSD for 2 times, and then he wasn't depressed anymore. Wow. And a psychotic housewife from Zurich took LSD and was cured, and so it was results were quite good. And then Sandoz really thought that they had like a game changer, like they had the key to happiness for humanity in their hands. The Swiss CEO was also quite, enthusiastic about it. Arthur Stoll is his name. And he communicated his enthusiasm to a few people. I mean, that was actually my research performance. with which I outperformed all historians who have looked at this, because no one found this. No one had actually looked at the papers of the CEO. Because I mean, not so many people really research LSD, but I did in the company archives of Novartis in Basel. So I looked at these papers for quite a while. It was quite difficult to actually understand what I had to look at. So I looked at the papers of the CEO, and he was corresponding a lot with an old friend of his, Richard Kuhn, who was a German biochemist. They had shared the same teacher at one point, Richard Wildstetter, a Jewish-German kind of maverick in terms of biochemistry, a Nobel Prize winner for chemistry in the early 20th century, who had taught these two guys and many other people, but they had become friends, Richard and Arthur Kuhn and Stoll, the German and the Swiss. And they were especially sharing all of their ergot research from early on, because that's difficult research and you need to share, stuff. So the only problem was that Stoll still shared, everything he found with Kuhn in 43, when Kuhn was the leading biochemist of Hitler and had developed a nerve poison called sarin, which is the deadliest poison ever created. And was also working on what the Nazis called a truth serum,
right,
which was an idea of Gestapo and SS to have a tool, a pharmaceutical tool, basically a drug at their disposal with which they could increase their chances of extracting secrets during interrogations of, resistance fighters or concentration camp inmates, basically anyone they wanted to interrogate, enemies of the state. So when Kuhn heard from Stoll that there was this big breakthrough at Sandoz, that they found the most potent drug that works on the human mind, Kuhn became very interested and requested a sample of ergotamine, which is the precursor to LSD. Like from ergotamine, you can make it in a lab. Like for Kuhn, it's very easy to make it. Or you could also make like a derivative of LSD. Like you could, alter it a little bit. Like you could experiment with ergotamine. It's like the base. So then the Nazis actually set up tests to test psychedelic compounds. They did this at the concentration camp of Dachau. So they tested it on inmates, on prisoners, and gave them mescaline and this other odorless, tasteless substance. That probably was LSD, because Kuhn, who was responsible for this program, received this ergotamine in October 43. Maybe he didn't make LSD, maybe he made LSA or LS something, or LSD with a, like that. There's no record, which is quite unusual for Richard Kuhn, because usually he did that, but that was top secret science. So what is a fact is that psychedelic compounds, mescaline and another odorless, tasteless substance, was given in Dachau to inmates. And I also read some reports of inmates receiving the drug, the psychedelic, and what they then experienced in the concentration camp, which is kind of interesting, because they one guy, like I read this one French guy, this inmate, political prisoner, and he had like an amazing trip. Like he loved it. Like, I mean, he was in the concentration camp. That's like the worst place you can be in the world. But still, the psychedelic experience still showed him how beautiful life is, and how, so it's,
wow.
He was just very, very unhappy when the trip ended, and he went, back into concentration camp reality, like from LSD bliss to concentration camp reality. That's quite shocking. And the SS never really could finish, their tests, because the concentration camp was liberated by American military in early 1945, and the Americans found also the reports on like that the SS did with the drugs, and American military at the time didn't just liberate Germany from National Socialism, but they also tried to learn all of the scientific research that the Germans had done, because the Germans had the reputation of the best scientists in the world, which I think was true until all the Jews were kicked out of Germany, because a lot of the scientists actually were Jews, but still also the non-Jewish Germans still working under Hitler were quite good. So the Americans thought that's, good information to get. That's how Operation Paperclip was developed, which is the big program to import Nazi scientists into America for example, the American rocket program and stuff like that. And a part of that that mission to extract all the scientific knowledge was also to extract knowledge in regards to biochemical weapons and also drugs as potential weapons. So Richard Kuhn, the old Nazi scientist, was interrogated by the Americans, and he was very forthcoming. He told them basically about the LSD, and that's how the American military learned about LSD. So Stoll, kind of the Swiss CEO, told the Nazis, and then the Nazis told the Americans.
Wow. So there was a lot of different, a lot of things that needed to happen before the American military found out about LSD. And
Right.
Like you said, it seemed like, to use like a stock market term, like everyone was quite bullish on LSD at the beginning. It seemed like it was, like you said, a miracle drug. It could bring you happiness to the most depressed people on earth. And so, and in your book, you do mention how in the late 40s and the 50s, everyone who had researched LSD or even tried LSD seemed to be really, really excited about the future it could bring. Do you mind just talking a little bit about that? How, like in the post-war, how was LSD received by like the scientific community and just the worldwide community at large?
Well, the neuroscientific community was very enthusiastic because it gave them a tool to learn about the human brain or the human consciousness, the human mind, which is kind of a hard topic. The brain is kind of hard to examine. So that, like, they thought that, like, there was one stream of research that they called LSD. They called these types of substances. I forgot the term. Mimic. I can't even say it in English. Like, they thought it mimics a psychosis.
Okay.
Like, so a brain on LSD is similar to a psychotic brain, which is not really true, but it is, like, you could say it changes the brain chemistry. LSD does. That's a fact. So by examining like the changes, they thought they could learn a lot about the brain, which makes sense. That's how it works. So LSD was seen as a tool to kind of like a torch. You could kind of light into the brain and understand a bit more, like, how does mental illness start? What is it actually? Like, what do neurotransmitters do? Like brain research is very difficult. It's actually a lot of storytelling too. Like, because what is in the brain is like very hard to figure it out. So LSD was, embraced by the scientific community. A lot of theories, a lot of tests, and no one thought it was a bad thing. It was a great thing. It was amazing. So that is the good LSD research. But I mean, obviously, why didn't then that's like how LSD would then finally be developed into a medicine, because at one point you realize, it's good against depression. So how do we dosage it? What's the dosage, and how do we administer it? And then you have it as a medicine. And Sandoz was preparing for that, and they were like thinking of a brand name for it, a certain brand name circling around. So they were really kind of getting close to doing that process that now was done, for example, with MDMA at the FDA, when the MAPS Foundation tried to register MDMA with the FDA, which got rejected a few weeks ago. So they were doing basically the same thing with LSD. And at the time, I mean, it was, as we mentioned before, it was already known to the American military as a potential weapon. So while the benevolent research was happening, there was also the research by the military. And then that research was taken over by the CIA in 1947 when this organization was founded in the Cold War against the Soviet Union, which the CIA director Dulles called brain warfare against communism, basically war of ideologies, which also had a paranoid quality to it, like the fear that like your neighbor is a communist or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So a truth drug would be very helpful actually for the American intelligence community. If they catch people that were maybe Russian spies, you just give them the truth drug, and that kind of disenables the ego, and then that person's just kind of sitting in front of you, or like you could just ask that person, "Are you a communist?" And the person would say, "Yeah, yes, you're right. You got me, man." So that's kind of the idea of the truth drug that the CIA was really going for. They went for it for several years with thousands of experiments. A huge program actually that the CIA did. They called it MK Ultra, which was like the code name for mind control efforts done by the CIA, which I'm pretty sure last until now. It's the CIA is just into mind control. They think it's an interesting topic because they think it would give America an edge, controlling its own population, also controlling other populations. So back then, LSD was a huge part of this mind control program. Today would probably be more like social media, usage and other things, but back then they really thought that LSD could be a useful tool. So and one guy was actually responsible for this. His name is Sidney Gottlieb, a very mysterious character. If you Google him, I think you will only find like one image or two images of this guy, even though he worked in a very high position of the US government, basically, for decades. And Gottlieb is a very curious character, like a strange guy, kind of a hippie type, like he was living on a farm with his wife, and they were raising goats and like only drank goat milk, but also he was obsessed with making a career at the CIA with mind control. So I guess he was a real believer in America and an anti-communist, and also quite a ruthless person, because the experiments that they did in America were basically a continuation of the Nazi experiments, only now it was done on American soil with American citizens, dosing a lot of American citizens unwittingly, and then observing them, and also universities. He were doing tests. Gottlieb had the genius idea to give money to foundations, like, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation, but many other like foundations that then found scientific research, because psychedelic research is expensive because you need to pay. Unless you do it unwittingly, then it's unethical and criminal. But that's the CIA. But you can also do tests, but then you have to pay the subjects, or it's expensive. It takes a long time, costs money. So the research is often dependent on funds you're getting, maybe from the industry or from foundations, which are kind of neutral. But obviously, they get their money from somewhere, but you don't really ask, I guess. Or at least back then, the universities, like a lot of universities, took part in this. The most prominent universities of America did LSD research and thought they were doing good research, but actually, the research was, tainted by the CIA, who gave the money basically. So it's always the person who gives the money that has influence also on the way experiments are conducted and what field they go into. So a lot of like scientists didn't know that they were actually doing research for the CIA, but did research for them. We found out much later when MK Ultra became known, because at one point it did stop in the 70s. I think it was Robert Kennedy who made it public, and then there was like the Church Committee that investigated it in Washington. So a lot of researchers at one point realized that they had been basically tricked and played into the hands of the of Gottlieb's big program to manipulate the human mind instead of heal the human mind, which is like what LSD originally stands for, and still now again stands for.
I'm curious.
God, go ahead,
sorry.
Steph.
I'm curious because my background when I'm not doing History for Weirdos is I'm a trauma therapist, and I worked with our military veterans with post-traumatic stress and all of those things that we typically associate with that population. And Andrew and I both grew up in the era of hearing exactly what you mentioned earlier, like LSD will make you jump out of windows, it'll make you violent, it'll make you crazy. Was there any negative effects that they found in all this research they were doing, or was it overwhelmingly positive?
Well, it's overwhelmingly positive, and for example, there's no lethal dose. Like you can take a lot of LSD. Like I met a person who was an LSD chemist, and he actually accidentally spilled a whole, he had a whole, not basket, but like a big, I don't know, what do you call it?
Like a container of sorts.
Yeah, like a container, like a glass container filled with
like
LSD.
A beaker.
Beaker, yeah, and it kind of, he slipped, and then he bathed in LSD, and he later said it was like 2 million dosages, and they immediately go like it, because it was like in a, like it, like he ran to the shower and washed it off, but he said he still he had the equivalent of like several 100,000 dosages at once. And he also said it didn't kill him at all. Like he said he had a great trip, and he said it was a very intense trip, and it didn't last for 8 hours. It lasted like for 2 days or something. And he just sat cross-legged and just kind of meditated and saw how the universe was created, and like he had a big trip. But it's not poisonous. Also, it doesn't make you addicted. It was actually used in the beginning in the AA programs, or the guy who developed AA wanted to include LSD therapy for alcoholics. And for example, in Russia, it's used for treatment of alcohol addiction. Probably in America too. I'm not sure, but it's not really a dangerous substance. Like it's not toxic. I mean, it's dangerous. Like I think probably most substances. Like I would say it's less dangerous than sugar. I think sugar is quite dangerous.
Right.
I mean, we all know that alcohol is dangerous. So LSD is dangerous if you take a large dosage, and you're you have an unstable mind, or you have, let's say you have a severe trauma. It's actually not a good time to take LSD unless you have a friend, which you as a therapist could be also like, or a therapist, or like guide, someone. Because if you would take that alone, let's say you have a trauma, like something happened and you don't really know what, or you're suffering from it, and then you take LSD, you might see it, and that might be too much, and that might be too much to take, so I'm pretty sure that some people go mad on LSD, but it's really a few cases. So it is a dangerous substance. It's a very potent substance. but it's less dangerous. I think it's much less dangerous than sugar or alcohol or tobacco. So I think it's totally healthy actually to take LSD, and especially if you take a low dosage. But still, we would need the FDA to give us a proper, the company that makes it needs to have like a patient information leaflet. You need to be informed about the dangers of it, and maybe it should be a prescription drug, so the doctor maybe should talk with you. Maybe it should be mandatory to take it with a friend or a therapist. I don't know. I mean, the society has to develop how LSD should be used. Right now the society basically says you're just on your own with LSD, like everyone who takes it just has no guideline whatsoever basically, except you can read a book like Trip, you understand a little bit better. But it's, I think it's a pretty careless and reckless how the U.S. government, treats this substance, which people use. Millions of people use LSD every year, so it's like because people know that it's good. It's a great drug. It's a great experience, so people just take it, and the government just behaves like no one should take. No one is taking. It just doesn't make sense how the government treats this whole topic. It's very reckless, actually, very dangerous. How the war against drugs is very dangerous to the health of the American people.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, Stephanie and I grew up in the prime era. You mentioned it, like of DARE. That's what the program was called. You're familiar with DARE, right? Yeah, so we were the prime demographic. We're like the millennial generation, and we were shoved that propaganda down our throats for.
I think that's a Reagan thing, right?
Yeah,
I believe
Nancy Reagan.
Just say no. Yeah, just say no. That was a whole thing, and it was awful. But going back, speaking of presidents, I know you alluded to your book, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so feel free to correct me. But I think in your book, you alluded that JFK might have taken LSD based off of one of his best friends going to the lead researcher of LSD in the early 60s and picking some up. And then a month later, JFK has his famous, now I'm blanking, one of his famous speeches about like unity and everyone being together.
You call it the peace speech.
Yes.
At the American University, I think, which is in Washington. You can look at it on let's say, YouTube. You can look at it later after this podcast. It's kind of funny because Kennedy was kind of a hawk. He was a Cold War warrior. He was like establishment president, Democratic warmongering president, like most Democratic presidents. And then, like before this peace speech, a few weeks before, his girlfriend Mary Pinchot, which was like a Washington socialite, kind of an influencer, I guess you could say.
Influencer before influencers.
Yeah, like an it girl. She visited Harvard University. Timothy Leary, who was professor there and who was like the leading LSD scientist, I guess you could say, Harvard professor, like developing it, psychology professor. And she said, I have an influential friend in Washington and he wants to try. I want to do it with him. And Leary actually wanted to take part in that experiment, but Mary said, no, it's impossible. She didn't reveal to Leary who it was. So there's no proof that it actually was JFK. There is proof that she smoked weed with JFK in the White House.
It's amazing.
And, she seemed to have also been a lover of JFK, not just a friend. At least they had an intimate relationship. She was in the White House a lot.
That's not surprising.
And she had LSD. And then after she, travels back to Washington with LSD, it only takes a few weeks until Kennedy gives the peace speech where he suddenly, like, everyone was totally shocked that the same guy would suddenly, like, it it's kind of a funny speech. He says things like, "Yeah, the Russians and we're all humans. Like they have children, we have children. We live on the same planet. Why don't we share the beautiful resources of the earth?" Like he really talks like a hippie.
Yeah.
Or like he talks like a normal person, like if you think about it. So like I think he just realized it, but maybe he didn't need LSD to realize. Maybe she had the LSD and realized it and told him, and they had beautiful sex, and JFK woke up the next morning and the sun was shining. He's like, why am I doing this arms race bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
But maybe he had LSD also. That's speculation. It doesn't matter. I mean, he gave the peace speech, and probably for the peace speech, I think that's the most probable explanation for his assassination. He got killed because that, like, complete. He wanted to end the Cold War. He wanted to end the arms race. That would have, changed a lot, and I would imagine that was the reason, because what would be the reason to kill JFK? It must be a reason. You don't do this for fun. You have to,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have an incentive, and that would be a big incentive if like the whole Cold War stops, and because a lot of people lived off that, not only arms producers, like just a lot of people also mentally. It's a whole way of life that he wanted to change. He basically was the hippie in office all of a sudden.
Right.
It's an interesting case, but we don't have definite, like with everything JFK, we don't have definite accounts. We don't, like, someone destroyed papers, or like Mary Pinchot, she kept a diary. And she was assassinated. It's really sad, and also probably connected to JFK's assassination, but who knows? Like, she was assassinated sometime after, like not too long after the JFK assassination. She was jogging in Washington, close to her home, and she was shot in the head. And the same day, there was a break-in into her apartment, and the diary was taken. Maybe in that diary, maybe she wrote a lot that was too dangerous, but that's also speculation. I'm not really a conspiracy theorist at all. I'm just, that's all we know, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You're just changed his mind. Her diary was stolen.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you're just laying out the facts, it seems like, and we can kind of fill in the gaps a bit.
Yeah, but sometimes we fill them in wrongly, so, yeah.
I'm curious if you've received any pushback on the book from people, if you've received any sort of negative commentary, because as we've mentioned, we've been fed a lot of propaganda on this drug. Are people upset at all at this book?
Well, I think the tide is turning. In the American society, for sure, like psychedelics are becoming mainstream. Somehow there's so much reports on them, and people start to realize dementia, depression, they are helping. People are realizing they were made illegal for different reasons in the 60s because, you could work against the peace movement who was trying to stop the Vietnam War. So that's why Lyndon B. Johnson made LSD illegal, Schedule 1. So people more and more understand this, and understand this from both camps. If we say there are two camps right now in America, like both camps seem to be fine with psychedelics. Like I was interviewed by Fox News, prime time, and I thought they would interview me to kind of shit on my book or something.
Yeah.
I asked them before, and they said, no, Jesse Waters, the host, who's considered a right-wing anchorman or something like that.
Absolutely.
They said that he loves the book, and he loves to talk about legalization of LSD with you. And he also was interested in JFK. So also the right-wing seems to be pro-legalization. I think the only people against it right now would also the right wing kind of, like the right wing, I think, criticize a lot big pharma,
Drugs
which
in general.
I think is everyone should criticize big pharma from left and right. I think the left also criticizes big pharma. So who doesn't criticize big pharma? I don't know. Maybe the mainstream, maybe the Democrats, like they're behind. That's like the right wing, like mind would like see it like that. So actually, prohibition of drugs is like a democratic thing, or it's like a really right. Like the Democrats are the real right wing because they're not, they're fueled by the capitalist system even more than the right wing. I mean, it's a very obscure situation in America for me as a German. Quite interesting and weird, but I think
it's weird for us as Americans.
Yes.
I think the far right is for drugs, and the far left is for drugs, and the left is for drugs. I mean, in the right also we have religious fanatics, Christian fanatics, which are probably not pro-drugs because they're really conservative people. So Trump, for example, was on a podcast, the Friedman podcast, a few days ago.
Okay.
And is being asked on that podcast something like, so what about medical marijuana? And he says, yeah, it's a great thing. It's good. We should, do it, And then he's also asked about mushrooms. Wouldn't it be great if all the Congress people were on mushrooms? Wouldn't it, get, he doesn't really know what he's talking about, obviously. But he says, yeah, I think the psychedelic is very interesting, and we should not, like, if it really helps, the brain. And so he there's like even from that angle, you get pro-drug, maybe it's just an opportunist, saying in that podcast because he knows that a lot of people listening to that podcast are pro-drug, pro-legalization. But I think slowly the tide is turning in America. And to answer your question, I think my book came at the exact right time. Like now, people are really interested in it, and also if you're interested in legalization and the drug topic, you want to know actually what happened. Why did it become illegal? Like, and that is my book. So by understanding the history of what happened, we can understand how we act now. So I think there's not a lot of resistance actually against it. I mean, I have not experienced any resistance at all. Everyone seems to love LSD. It's really weird.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you mentioned that it's kind of like I think it's an older, extremely right-wing or extremely left-wing. You go off on one side, you kind of end back into this middle area, or muddled area, I should say. And I think it's those people that are still in power, right? They still are in power in the federal government, and they're the ones that are not keen, maybe necessarily, to go forward with like legalization of LSD, but also even marijuana or psilocybin, right? That's at least my take and my understanding of it. But honestly, a lot of the times, who knows, right? Our government, not to go on a diatribe, they don't necessarily have our best interests in mind.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the problem really is big pharma in this case. I mean, there's one problem is the ideology. Like religious people would say it's not allowed, It's not, it creates different visions also than, God. Maybe you see different gods or something. So it's, if you're a religious fanatic, you don't like that. But I think probably big pharma really doesn't like it because they make a lot of money with antidepressants, SSRIs, very bad medications actually that make you addicted, and you can only function when you take them. So you have to pay every day basically, or they get money every day from each pill, every day by 1/3 of the American population. That's quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like LSD, you wouldn't take every day to get rid of your depression. You would take it maybe once in your life only, or maybe you need it once a month, or
right.
Even once a month would be often, maybe twice a year, or like, so it's a different business model. It's like probably not as lucrative, even though if you go to any state in the United States, like where you are, California, you have so many like marijuana cannabis dispensaries, so it seems to be quite a business,
Oh yes,
but not. But I mean, the beautiful thing is, and I mean, I haven't really examined the structure of the cannabis industry in the United States, but I met quite a few entrepreneurs in LA just this summer, like basically normal people who make a business now growing weed, together with friends, and you have like experts, and then you make, you experiment and you make this product or that product. So it seems a bottom-up industry that is not being controlled by the pharmaceutical giants, which I think is very healthy. So I think the psychedelic movement could experience the same. Like in Oregon now, I guess you can buy like psilocybin gummies. Like in California, you can only buy THC gummies, but apparently now in Oregon, psilocybin has been legalized the same way. So, and I don't think Big Pharma is jumping in. I think other people who have knowledge and who have love for the product, and they will provide it. So it's kind of a shift within that brutal pharmaceutical landscape that needs to happen. And they're fighting it, obviously, and they have also a lot of say in Washington. Like the pharma lobby is very strong. So it needs determination from the politicians. They need to fight, they really need to stand up for it. And I don't know if the new administration will do it. But if they have the well-being and the health of the American people in mind, they would do it. And I mean, America is like split over this question of should there be healthcare or not, which for us is very strange because we all have healthcare. It's not really bad for anybody to have healthcare. It's quite good, actually. But America is not so sure about this. But if you had psychedelic legalization, I mean, that would be your healthcare, basically. I mean, a lot like the whole equation of costs and what you need, and that would change. And I think it would be so healthy for the American society that it would actually take a huge leap forward, also a cultural leap forward.
So well said. I agree.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think you also, I just want to double down on the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry at large. As you're right, that's, I think, one of the big blockers to just Americans being more healthy, because it is like, I'm not going to pretend I even understand the German healthcare system at all, but the American system is more based off of a corporatocracy as opposed to, either single payer or even non-single payer, right? But everyone has like guaranteed healthcare that it's not controlled by corporations and instead maybe controlled by, another entity, or not controlled at all.
Yeah, America is controlled by corporations.
Yeah, we have a
100%.
Healthcare system.
That's contradictory to democracy. It's actually called fascism. So it's like America is a low-intensity fascist country that tends to be a democracy. It's kind of a sad. It's in a sad state, because people realize it's not really democracy. That's why so many people are frustrated, because that's what we always have been sold, our whole life. We're in a democracy, and now we're actually in a corporate. How do you call that?
A corporatocracy, or I mean, honestly, I've said this to Stephanie. I usually don't say this on the podcast, but I do say we live in a somewhat fascist country now, a police state. I typically stay away from fascists because then people, they have a certain idea in their mind and they just narrow down on that. But
fascist, by definition, by Mussolini, who invented fascism, is when corporations interfere with the political process. That's so basically fascism is a degeneration of capitalism.
Yes.
So that's So it certainly has fascist tendencies. The American system, just like the reality in Germany, has fascist elements in it. We had a chancellor in the 70s, Willy Brandt, and he said, wir müssen Demokratie wagen, which means we always must dare democracy. If we want to live in a democratic system, we must always try to expand the democracy. We must always be extremely careful where democracy is being compromised. So we're we lost that approach like a long time ago. Like there's so many undemocratic things going on in our world. Like, even the American elections is like ridiculous. Why can only have two parties? Like,
yes,
it doesn't make sense. It's not democratic. Of course it's democratic. You can choose between A and B, but why can't you choose between A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Why aren't there no coalitions? Like, the American system is a really bad system because it's so old.
It's horrible.
It's never been reformed.
You're absolutely correct. I mean,
America never lost a war. It's quite healthy to lose a war because then you reform your system, because you don't continue the same as before. Like Germany completely changed its system after it lost the last war. So countries that are too successful, they also have they run into problems because they don't reform. They think they got it all.
Exactly. The success goes to our heads and we're like, well, we don't need to change anything. When in reality, maybe we do. It's always funny too, because I talk to Stephanie about this all the time, but our republic was founded upon the ideals of the Roman Republic. It's not really like that. You don't really have to dive in that much to figure this out. A lot of the founding fathers were uber history nerds, and especially some of them even had the history of, or the fall and decline of the Roman Empire, like first edition back in the 1700s. And you can see even now, like the correlation of, okay, you have this like little republic that, has some problems, but is generally free, right? We also have the caveat of slavery, which is like a whole nother thing. And you see this republic just get really big, really fast, and then all of a sudden, and you have a ton of money flowing in from external sources, and a lot of wealth is created, and you have a military that all of a sudden is really, really powerful, and you're kind of like, okay, well, what now? And like you said, it's like the degradation of like our free market system has coalesced under, either corporations or special interests, which really, control the government and don't really enact the will of the people, which is, enacting the will of the people by definition is democracy or, republicanism, however you want to phrase it. But, without getting too much into it, I don't even feel, I know that's gone now, at least to a certain extent.
If anyone could use LSD, it's probably Americans. That's what it sounds like. Well, democratize our health a little bit.
Exactly. Norman, I before I forget, I want to talk about the original title of Tripped, because I agree with you, by the way. I think the original title, the one you came up with, is better than the one the publishers came up with. So why don't you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, the original title is LSD for Mom, which was, the emotional arc that I go in the narrative of this book. And I don't know why the German publisher didn't like it. And usually the other territories, they kind of mimic then the original title. So it would have been called LSD for Mama in Germany. It probably would have been called LSD for Mom in America. And I think it would sell more.
It's very catchy, definitely. That would catch my attention in the bookstore.
Yeah. So the HarperCollins, they could maybe change it for the paperback. I don't know if that's possible, but I think it would be interesting to test it, because everyone says so. Even Joe Rogan.
Yeah, there you go.
Everyone agrees.
It is a better name.
Yeah, it's just better.
Yeah, LSD for Mom.
That brings me, before we wrap up, which we've really enjoyed hearing from you, but I am curious, going back to the beginning, what did your dad think of the story that you told him?
Well, he was convinced. I could convince the judge I could tell him the truth about LSD. So he basically said LSD is innocent, should not be put into prison, should be actually put into the pharmacy. And if the lawgiver is still not seeing this, I'm happy to break the law. So he also discussed it with my mother, his wife. And we started on the self-experimentation in the family, and that's been really great. So LSD for Mom works not only as a book but also in reality.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. I
Yeah.
can only imagine what a cool experience that is to do as a family. Very healing, it sounds like.
Yeah, it is quite unusual. Like you just start to talk a lot more about anything, you know. Like since then, our relationship has become more open, and we less taboos, and because LSD is the truth drug. Actually, it brings out the truth in all of us in a way, like also in families. It's a very healing. It was for our family at least a very healing experience.
So glad to hear
So the
that.
Nazis weren't actually that far off from calling it a truth drug. It was just a truth drug in a way that they did not anticipate, and quite frankly, probably didn't care about.
Right, exactly. So the book could also be called the truth drug, but I think LSD for Mom is still the better title.
Oh yeah, I love that. Well, as we're wrapping up, I want to make sure I put the book in frame for the video. So anyone who's watching the video podcast, this is what it looks like. It's obviously inverted right now, but it's Tripped, Nazi Germany, the CIA, and the Dawn of the Psychedelic Age. By the way, that subtitle is amazing. Like that was, as soon as I saw this, by the way, Norman, I was like, I'm going to read this like pretty much immediately. And I did. I mean, Stephanie was there. I read it in a few days. I mean,
Colin did do a good job in the end also.
Yeah,
they did. Yeah, that subtitle was really good. But I mean, also to be fair, like you are an incredible writer as well. The way you tell stories is so good. The way you these are disparate kind of facts that all coalesce into a single timeline, and the way you paint that narrative is amazing. And I know you don't call yourself a historian, but I think you have a better claim to the title historian than we do, because you were the one going into the archives. You were the one going in and actually researching the original documentation, right? That is like what, by definition, what historians do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I was the weirdo who became a historian.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
We love it.
We love it so much. Well, Norman, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciated, you being here and you telling us everything about the book, drug policy, LSD. The list goes on. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Until next time.
Yeah, until next time. We appreciate you.
Bye, weirdos.